Ubisoft has said the quiet thing out loud. If they're going to start selling you on gaming streaming services, which has been a complete and abject failure, if we're going by PlayStation Plus, if we're going by Xbox Game Pass, if we're going by Ubisoft service, if we're going by Amazon Luna, like this stuff exists. This stuff is supposed to be the technology that replaces consoles, but it hasn't happened because gamers are pretty stringent about this. I don't want to play a game. I don't want to pay a full $70 for a game and not own it, right? That has been a pretty consistent thing from a lot of people, is that like the idea that we can't own games and resell them, and that like the company can just take them away at any time for whatever reason, is a deplorable thing and should be pushed back against it. But those evil video gamers, right? Those game creators, like the people who are behind the corruption in the video game industry, the people who are the reason that we have to deal with situations like Gamergate and the refusal to support Nintendo consoles, right? The people who are religiously trying to like ruin gaming with microtransactions, with unfinished products, with all of this stuff. Like they are trying to get rid of ownership of games. It's not just about physical media. I think people are being a bit like disingenuous about that. Like what they're trying to do is make the jump into the gamer not owning the games themselves. And when it comes to Ubisoft, they gotta sell that subscription service. They gotta sell this because otherwise they're gonna be left behind. And it's becoming more and more obvious that people don't trust these streaming services. People don't want to spend a lot of time and money and investment in supporting a bazillion different subscription services across a bazillion different companies, when in reality they just want to play like Grand Theft Auto or something. And it's really interesting to see this play out because I think Nintendo has handled this the best out of any company out there, where like, they attach their older games to the streaming service while still preserving like the older model of like giving you ownership of physical or digital games, while like everyone else is desperately trying to move past the physical media. So you can't resell your games. So they can nickel and dime you for everything. So they can just rip the game from you if they feel like it, right? Like the issue is that gaming companies are trying to take that next step into like having absolute control over the gaming community. And like 15 years ago, back in 2008, you guys gobbled this up, right? In 2008, you guys looked at those $60 games and were just like, oh man, this is the price we pay for HD graphics. Oh, I can't wait for Gears of War or whatever. Like you slobbered all over that. Like I remember that happening, right? Like I remember seeing like people just completely justifying this $60 price tag for these lesser games, right? And then like with this gen, with the price hike to $70, I think the bubble has finally burst. I do think more and more people are kind of looking at these games and are just like, I don't want to pay $70 for Mortal Kombat 1. I don't want to pay another $50 for like all of the DLC. The game just isn't worth my time. The writing isn't good. It's retconned anyway. It's the same thing we've gotten over and over again. Like, why would I bother? Right? Gotham Knights also flop. Suicide Squad is also going to flop. Like, I think the reason they're trying to move to this model, they're trying to move away from the physical media. It's not just to remove your ownership of the games. It's to implement microtransaction models. It's to implement the mobile model into like AAA gaming, which so far has been a complete resounding failure. Like even massive AAA companies that people just gladly took it in the ass for years, Bungie, right, who hasn't produced a good game ever, right? They couldn't make it work with Destiny. And they had like the biggest shill campaign I've ever seen. Like people trying to justify them, say the game was a success, saying that like it was this super popular thing, but in reality, it was imploding. That thing was a failure right out of the gate. And Bungie kept saying they would fix it, and people kept believing them. And in reality, like as of this year, it feels like, I think they finally started firing people. The Sony acquisition has not been kind to them. They're finally letting people go, and Finally, it seems like we're seeing an end to the Destiny menace. But that is the reality. That was the beta test for what we're going to see going forward. Is companies trying desperately to implement the mobile market, the mobile model into AAA gaming. Right? They've been trying it obsessively for a long time. People have been rejecting it. Like, people went along with like certain things like DLC and certain microtransactions or whatever, but like it's finally all falling apart. And they're getting more and more desperate, and they're like getting more and more intense about what they intend to do. But more and more, I think people are rejecting it. And I hope this eventually like spreads to the mobile market as well. I really hope people stop supporting mobile games. I feel like they're completely different demographics though, because I feel like console gamers are never gonna cuck and like support the mobile scene, like the mobile model, but like mobile models are also not going to play these AAA games, right? Like I don't know what the implosion of the mobile market is gonna look like, but again, I think Nintendo is a step ahead of the rest of the industry in this respect. Like, a lot of people don't give them credit for this, but Nintendo has stopped releasing DLC for their games. They have stopped doing microtransactions. Like, they have stopped producing those like free-to-play gambling games, right? Even their mobile games, stuff like Fire Emblem Heroes, are like very, very, very reasonably priced, right? Dragalia Lost was straight up shut down because like the developers were upset that Nintendo wouldn't let them exploit the audience enough, right? Right? Like, Nintendo is like the guiding light when it comes to this issue. Like, I think it's very possible that Nintendo could straight up fund Fire Emblem Heroes through the success of mainline Fire Emblem. And as a result of that, like, Fire Emblem Heroes will be a better alternative to stuff like Fate Go or like whatever gacha game that people are shilling that weekend. Like, I already think it's quite a bit better than its alternatives. The issue is that like the mobile market desperately doesn't want Nintendo to succeed in it. Like, the instant that people realize that there's like a specific company that's producing like mobile games that you can legit play for free, it's over. Right? Like, the issue is like getting to that point and getting people to like kind of take Nintendo seriously in the mobile space and kind of move away from like all of these established brands. Angry Birds' downfall has been really interesting to watch, but I think it's also going to extend to quite a few other series. Right? Like, I just don't see... The mobile market is interesting because it makes a ton of money, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's because the games are particularly innovative or fun. They're just time wasters for the audience, right? Like, they aren't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's interesting to think that, like, I played mobile games back when they were prevalent in like the 2000, like early 2000s, back when they were becoming a thing. Like, who do you know who still remembers like Temple Run or whatever? Who do you know who still remembers like all of that early stuff? Like the original Angry Birds. Like, it still exists. Like, it still has a player base, I'm sure. But like, are people going to look back on it like 20 years ago and say like, wow, Temple Run, it all started on iOS? Like, no, I think in a lot of ways, this kind of thing, it's inherently disposable entertainment. It is the reality TV of video games. And it's remarkable to me that like how few people in this community still take mobile gaming, still don't take mobile gaming seriously, right? It is on the way out. And with that in mind, I think with the unpopularity of this model, I think gamers in general are going to turn their backs on this attempt at like mobilizing the AAA market. Like, I don't think people are going to accept Ubisoft's attempts at adding microtransactions to everything. They haven't been. I would argue that's a big reason why Assassin's Creed fell off, right? Because that's when the game started getting like pushback, was when like they started adding microtransactions into their single player games. Like, I do think that is a thing that is going to kill them in the long run. Like, more and more, I think people are going to gravitate towards Nintendo products for not having any of that, right? Like, the team decided for Animal Crossing that having the player be able to pay for real money to get bells would be like against the spirit of the game, right? And that's something that's always stuck with me as like just a critical aspect of what makes Nintendo objectively superior to mobile gaming, right? Like you make in-game currency by playing the game, right? That's how it should be. You unlock content by playing the game. That's how it should be. Like you shouldn't have to like pay for DLC, right? It should be on the disc waiting for you to unlock it, right? Like I uh I uh I want to see like gaming become better again, right? And it does feel like it's heading in that direction with certain developers and certain companies, specifically Nintendo. But like more and more, like we're seeing a lot of these, some of the most corrupt people in the industry. You know, people like Square Enix, companies like Ubisoft, EA, Activision, Blizzard. Like they're pulling more and more deranged stunts that try and keep people playing. Right, Overwatch is a really good example. Like the player base for their like extremely astroturf game is dying. What do? They reboot the entire thing and call it a sequel and completely tank whatever goodwill they had with fans. Right, you know, like they're not going to sell more microtransactions. You know, people have like given up on it. Like Blizzard is dead in the water. Like Overwatch is never ever going to recover from that. It's kind of shocking how much Overwatch has fallen off over the years. Like I've known people who are like hardcore fans of that for like 5 years straight who like don't play anymore. And I've always spoken out about how ridiculous the hype Overwatch got was, how unwarranted that was. But like seeing it play out has been super validating for me. I'm so proud of the community for finally like taking a stand against that and like kind of addressing the issues that I myself had. And more, I hope that people start pushing back against these kind of things, right? Like an Overwatch should not be allowed again. You know, like, I think a big reason why The Last of Us Part 2 multiplayer got canceled was because Naughty Dog knew the microtransaction model was not going to work, right? Like people see this stuff and they're immediately just like not interested. Like it's not even like, oh, I'll download it for free and see, like people are just like, no, like I am not even giving your game a shot. And you know what? That is exactly how it should be.